Get this woman off my plane before she embarrasses herself any further. Brenna Holloway looked Imani Okafor up and down, her smile sharp and rehearsed. You hear me? This is first class, not a place where anyone can wander in pretending they belong. Imani didn't move. Her boarding pass was already in her hand. The seat number printed clearly across the top. I'm in seat 2A. This is my seat. Brenna let out a small, brittle laugh that carried down the polished aisle of the private charter. Sweetie, that seat belongs to the founder of Lattimore Aerospace. He's expecting her on this flight, and you are not her. The cabin went silent. A male flight attendant near the galley shifted uncomfortably. Ma'am, perhaps we should check the manifest one more time, but Brenna had already made up her mind. She stepped closer to Imani, her perfume thick and sharp. No, what's going to happen is you're going to stop pretending, collect that little bag of yours and walk back down those stairs. Next time, learn which planes were never built for people like you. Brenna had no idea Imani was the $410 million founder whose name was painted on the tail of the aircraft. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you're watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you do not want to miss. Dr. Imani Okafor stepped onto the jetway at Teterboro Executive Airport, her heels making soft sounds against the carpeted ramp. The early morning sun caught the polished silver fuselage of the Gulfstream G700, gleaming like a blade against the pale October sky. She carried a slim leather portfolio under her arm, the kind that did not announce its contents but suggested they mattered. Inside that portfolio were preliminary documents for the largest aerospace acquisition of her career, a $410 million deal that would merge Lattimore Aerospace, the company she had founded 12 years earlier, with a defense contractor in Seattle. The signing was scheduled for that afternoon. 6 investors from 3 continents were already in the air, converging on Boeing Field. Imani was the only one boarding from New Jersey, and she had built this entire empire from the ground up while raising her son alone. She had earned every rivet on the plane waiting at the end of the jetway. The morning light slanted through the small oval windows as she approached the open cabin door. She wore a cream-colored suit that fit perfectly, a thin gold chain at her collarbone, and the kind of quiet confidence that came from 24 years of being underestimated and proving everyone wrong. At 43, Imani had learned to read rooms before she entered them. She studied the woman waiting at the cabin door before she crossed the threshold. Blonde hair pulled into a tight chignon, a crisp navy uniform with a red scarf knotted at the throat, a name tag that read Brenna Holloway. Brenna stood with her hands clasped in front of her, the posture of someone trained to be pleasant to important people and dismissive to everyone else. Imani had seen that posture 1,000 times in 1,000 different uniforms. Good morning, Imani said, her voice calm and clear. She held out her boarding pass. Seat 2A. Brenna's eyes flickered down to the pass, then up to Imani's face, then down again. The polite smile remained fixed, but something behind her eyes shifted, calcified. She took the pass between 2 manicured fingers, as if it might be sticky. And your name, she asked, though the name was printed right there in black ink. Dr. Imani Okafor. Brenna's lips pursed slightly. She walked back into the galley, her heels clicking sharply, and made a small show of consulting a tablet on the counter. The cabin behind her was nearly empty. 2 other passengers were already seated near the rear, both men in suits, both engrossed in their phones. Imani waited at the threshold, her portfolio still tucked under her arm, her patience intact. A second flight attendant emerged from the cockpit area, a tall young man with sandy hair and a name tag that read Connor Pratt. He glanced at Imani, then at Brenna, then back at Imani. He gave a small professional nod. Welcome aboard, ma'am. Brenna spoke before Imani could respond. Connor, I'm handling this. Could you check on Mr. Whitfield in the back? Connor hesitated for half a second, the kind of hesitation that lasts just long enough to be noticed by anyone paying attention. Then he turned and walked toward the rear of the cabin. Brenna set the tablet down with deliberate slowness. Dr. Okafor, she said, drawing the title out as if testing whether it would hold weight. I'm sorry, but this flight is reserved for a private charter. I'm not seeing your name confirmed on my manifest. Imani's expression remained patient. She had expected something like this. Not this exactly, not here, but something. 24 years had taught her that the question was never whether the door would close in her face. The question was always how and who would be standing on the other side when she opened it again. Could you check the manifest under Lattimore Aerospace? Imani asked gently. The charter is in the company's name. Brenna's smile thinned into something colder. Ma'am, I know who chartered this aircraft, and I'm telling you, you are not on the list. Imani took a slow breath. The cabin air smelled faintly of leather conditioner and freshly brewed coffee. Behind Brenna, through the open galley curtain, she could see the small built-in espresso machine still hissing softly. Everything about this aircraft was familiar to her. She had signed the purchase order for it 18 months ago. She had chosen the cream leather seats and the walnut paneling herself. She had stood on the tarmac in Savannah the day it was delivered and run her hand along the fuselage like a woman greeting an old friend. May I see the manifest? Imani asked. Her voice was steady, unhurried, the same voice she used in boardrooms when a man twice her age tried to interrupt her presentation. Brenna tilted her head, the practiced sympathy of a customer service smile pulling at the corners of her mouth. I'm afraid manifests are confidential, ma'am. Privacy regulations. Imani nearly smiled at that. There was no such regulation, not for a passenger whose own name should have been on the document. Then please call the charter coordinator, Imani said. Her name is Celine Park. Her number is on the booking confirmation in your tablet under the contact field. Something flickered across Brenna's face. Surprise, quickly buried. People who didn't belong didn't usually know the names of charter coordinators. They didn't usually know which field contained the contact number. Brenna recovered quickly. I don't need to call anyone. The manifest is the manifest. She set the boarding pass down on the galley counter, well out of Imani's reach, a small gesture of possession. Look, I understand mistakes happen. Maybe you booked a commercial flight and got confused about the terminal. Teterboro can be disorienting if you're not familiar with private aviation. The condescension was so practiced, it almost sounded gentle. Imani let the silence stretch for a beat longer than was comfortable. She had learned this trick years ago from her grandmother, a woman who had cleaned houses for 40 years in Birmingham and had survived it all by knowing exactly when not to speak. The pause did its work. Brenna's smile twitched. Ms. Halloway, Imani said finally, reading the name tag aloud with quiet precision. I would like you to make one phone call, Celine Park. 2 minutes. If she tells you I am not the passenger on this aircraft, I will walk back down the jetway and you will not hear from me again. If she tells you I am, then we both go about our morning. It was a fair offer. It was, in fact, the only reasonable offer that had been made in the last 5 minutes. Brenna stared at her for a long moment. The two passengers in the back had begun to glance forward, drawn by the unmistakable feeling of friction in the cabin. Connor Pratt had reappeared in the aisle, a bottle of sparkling water still in his hand, frozen in place like a man who had wandered into a conversation he was not supposed to witness. I'm not making any phone calls, Brenna said. Her voice had hardened now, the customer service polish wearing thin. I have a responsibility to the actual passenger. The founder of Lattimore Aerospace is a very important woman, and she is not going to be pleased to find someone in her seat when she boards. Imani felt the familiar warmth begin at the back of her neck. Not anger, not yet. Something older than anger, something her mother used to call the slow heat, the quiet burn that came from being told, again and again, that you were not who you said you were. Ms. Halloway, she said softly. I am the founder of Lattimore Aerospace. Brenna laughed. It was not a kind laugh, it was the laugh of a woman who has decided deep in some place she does not examine, that the world is sorted into categories, and that she is the one who does the sorting. Ma'am, please. The founder of Lattimore Aerospace was on the cover of Aviation Weekly last month. I read the article. She paused, letting the implication settle. So, unless you'd like to keep embarrassing yourself, I'm going to have to ask you to step back onto the jetway. The two passengers in the back were openly watching now. One of them, a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses, had lowered his phone to his lap. Connor had set the water bottle down on a tray table and was standing very still, the way men sometimes stand when they are deciding whether to intervene and what it will cost them if they do. Imani did not raise her voice. She did not move. She simply tilted her head a fraction of an inch and said, "The Aviation Weekly cover you read was the September issue. The photograph was taken in front of the engine bay at the Savannah facility. I am wearing a navy blazer in that photograph. Behind me, painted on the hangar wall, are the words founded 2013, built by hand, owned by us. I chose those words. I painted the first letter myself." Brenna's smile did not move, but behind her eyes, something began to slide. For one long moment, Brenna said nothing. The hum of the auxiliary power unit filled the cabin, soft and steady, like the breathing of the aircraft itself. Connor Pratt took a half-step forward, opened his mouth, then closed it again. The thin man in the back row leaned forward slightly in his seat, and then Brenna did what people who have decided too quickly often do. She doubled down. "Anyone can memorize a magazine article," she said, her voice rising just enough to carry. "I've been doing this job for 9 years, ma'am. You would not believe how many people try to talk their way onto private aircraft. They read a profile, they study a name, they walk up here in a nice suit, and they think no one will check." She gestured with the back of her hand, a small dismissive flick. "I'm checking." Imani watched her. There was no cruelty in Imani's face, only a kind of quiet, terrible patience. "Ms. Halloway," she said, "what you are doing right now is going to be very difficult to undo." Brenna's chin lifted. "Is that a threat?" "No," Imani said. "It is an observation. I have made it more than once in my life, to people who looked exactly like you, in moments exactly like this one. I have never once been wrong about it." Brenna's hand moved toward the small radio clipped to her belt. "I'm calling ground security." "Please do," Imani said. "Ask for Marcus Riley. He is the head of operations at this terminal. Tell him Dr. Okafor is at the door of November 740 Lima Alpha, and that there is a question about the manifest. He will resolve this in under 3 minutes." Marcus Riley was not on any boarding pass. He was not a name a casual imposter would have known. Brenna's hand hovered over the radio. She did not press the button. Connor Pratt cleared his throat. "Brenna," he said quietly, "maybe we should just call Celine. It's 2 minutes, I'll do it if you don't want to." Brenna turned on him, and her face was no longer composed. It was tight, blotched at the cheekbones, the face of a woman who has felt the floor shift under her and is choosing to stomp instead of step. "Stay out of this, Connor. I am the lead on this cabin." "I'm not trying to overstep," he said. "I'm just saying it's a quick call." I said, "Stay out of it." The thin man in the back rose from his seat. He was tall, perhaps in his early 60s, with silver hair combed carefully back and a soft leather briefcase in his hand. He walked up the aisle without hurry. "Excuse me," he said, his voice quiet but firm. I couldn't help overhearing. "I'm a passenger on this flight, and I think there's been a misunderstanding." Brenna turned to him with the kind of smile she had not offered Imani. Warm, receptive, the smile of someone who recognizes their own kind. "Sir, I'm so sorry for the disturbance. I'm handling it. If you'd like to return to your seat, we'll be wheels up in just a few minutes." The man did not return to his seat. He looked at Imani, and then he looked at Brenna, and his expression did not change. "I think you should call Celine Park," he said. Brenna's smile faltered. "Sir, with respect, this is a cabin matter, and I am the senior." "I am Dr. Theodore Lange," the man said very calmly. "I am one of the principal investors on the deal that is being signed in Seattle this afternoon, the deal that this aircraft is flying us to. I have not yet met Dr. Okafor in person, but I have been on more than 30 phone calls with her over the past 4 months. I recognize her voice, I recognize her name, and I recognize what is happening here." The cabin went very quiet. Brenna's mouth opened slightly, the flush in her cheeks deepened. "Aye, sir, I am simply following protocol. Anyone can claim to be anyone. I have to verify." "Then verify," Theodore said. He glanced at Imani. There was something in his eyes that was not surprise. Not really. It was the tired recognition of a man who had seen this happen before, in different cabins, in different boardrooms to different women, and who had decided somewhere along the way that he was not going to keep pretending he had not seen it. "Make the call." Brenna stood very still. The radio on her belt crackled faintly with a distant transmission about a different aircraft. Outside the window, a ground crew member walked past, pushing a luggage cart. The world kept moving. Inside the cabin, 3 feet of carpeted floor separated Imani from a seat she had paid for and an aircraft she owned. Brenna did not move, and then instead of picking up the phone, instead of stepping back, she did something that would later be played, frame by frame, in a federal hearing room. She reached past Imani, took hold of the boarding pass on the galley counter, and tore it cleanly in half. "There," she said, her voice trembling now with something halfway between fury and fear. "Now you don't have a boarding pass. Now please step off the aircraft." The sound of the boarding pass tearing was small, a soft, dry rip, barely louder than the hum of the cabin lights. But it landed in the air like a struck bell. Connor Pratt actually flinched. Theodore Lange's face went very still, the kind of stillness that precedes a decision being made and not unmade. The other passenger in the back, a man in his 40s wearing a charcoal suit and a wedding band, slowly stood up from his seat. He did not approach, he simply stood, the way a witness stands at a hearing when they understand that what they see will matter later. Imani looked down at the two halves of her boarding pass lying on the galley counter. Then she looked up at Brenna. She did not raise her voice, she did not move toward her. She simply said, very softly, that was a mistake. Brenna's hands were shaking now, though she was trying to hide it by pressing them flat against the counter. You need to leave the aircraft. I'm calling security. Yes, Imani said. Please do. And then, with the same unhurried movement she had used to offer the boarding pass in the first place, she reached into the side pocket of her leather portfolio and removed her phone. She did not call security. She called a number she knew by heart, a number she had dialed at 3 in the morning when a part shipment got stuck in customs in Munich, a number she had dialed from a hospital waiting room when her son broke his arm at summer camp. The number rang twice. A woman's voice answered, brisk and warm. Celine, it's Imani. I'm on the jetway at Teterboro. There's a situation at the cabin door. The lead attendant has refused to verify the manifest and has just torn up my boarding pass. I'd like you to call the terminal operations desk and ask Marcus Riley to come to gate B4 personally. I would also like you to put me through to Whitfield Aviation Services and let them know I will be filing a formal incident report before Wheels Up. Please do not delay the other investors. We will leave on schedule. The voice on the other end said something short and professional. Imani said, "Thank you, Celine," and hung up. Brenna had gone very pale. The phrase incident report had landed somewhere behind her eyes, and her brain had begun, finally, to catch up to what her mouth had been doing for the last 10 minutes. "Ma'am," she said, and her voice was different now, a thinner, higher version of itself. "I think we may have had a communication issue. If you'd like to step into the galley for a moment, I can reprint the boarding pass and we can—" "No," Imani said, "we will not be stepping into the galley. We will wait here, at the door, until Marcus Riley arrives." She turned slightly, just enough to address Theodore Lange and the man in the charcoal suit, both of whom were now standing in the aisle. "Gentlemen, I apologize for the delay. Please feel free to take your seats. This will be resolved shortly." Theodore did not sit. Neither did the other man. They both, in a quiet, unspoken way, made it clear that they were going to remain exactly where they were until the door of the aircraft had been settled one way or the other. Connor Pratt stepped past Brenna into the galley and picked up the intercom phone. "I'm calling the captain," he said, more to himself than to anyone else. Brenna whipped around. "Connor, do not. I am the lead. I am the senior. Brenna." His voice was low, but it had a quality his voice had not had before. It was the voice of a man who had decided to stop being careful about his job. "You just tore up a passenger's boarding pass in front of 2 witnesses. The captain needs to know." He pressed the intercom button. Through the cockpit door, faintly, the second chime sounded. The cockpit door opened a moment later. Captain Joaquin Reyes stepped out into the cabin, a tall man in his 50s with a clipped silver mustache and the easy bearing of someone who had been flying private aircraft for 30 years. He looked at Connor, he looked at Brenna, he looked at the 2 halves of the boarding pass on the counter. He looked at Imani, and then very slowly his face shifted, not in surprise, in recognition. "Dr. Okafor," he said. Imani inclined her head. "Captain Reyes, it's good to see you." "And you, ma'am. I flew you out of Savannah in August. We had that headwind issue over the Carolinas. I remember, you handled it beautifully." Captain Reyes turned his head slowly toward Brenna. His expression did not change, but something in the air around him did. "Ms. Halloway," he said, "step into the galley with me, please." Brenna did not move. "Captain, I was simply—" "Now," she moved. The captain looked back at Imani. "Ma'am, I am deeply sorry. We will have this corrected within the next few minutes. Please, take your seat. I will personally bring you a fresh boarding pass." Imani did not take her seat. "Not yet, Captain," she said. "I would prefer to wait at the door. Marcus Riley is on his way." Captain Reyes held her gaze for a long moment, and then he nodded once, slowly. "Of course, ma'am." Outside on the jetway, footsteps were already approaching. Quick, purposeful, the unmistakable cadence of a man who has been told that something has gone very wrong on his airfield. Marcus Riley came up the jetway at something just short of a run. He was a broad-shouldered man in his late 40s, a former Air Force loadmaster who now ran ground operations at Teterboro with the kind of quiet authority that did not need to be announced. He wore a Navy windbreaker with the airport logo on the chest and carried a tablet under his arm. Behind him, 2 steps back, walked a younger woman in a similar windbreaker, a radio held loosely in her hand. Marcus stopped at the open cabin door. He did not step inside. He looked at Imani first. "Dr. Okafor, are you all right?" "I'm fine, Marcus. Thank you for coming." His eyes moved past her into the cabin, took in Captain Reyes standing near the galley curtain, Connor Pratt, with one hand still on the intercom phone, Theodore Lange, and the man in the charcoal suit standing in the aisle like sentries, and Brenna Holloway just visible behind the galley curtain, her arms wrapped tightly around her own ribs as if she were cold. Marcus's jaw tightened, just slightly. The kind of tightening a man does when he is choosing his words very carefully because he has not yet decided which ones he is willing to say out loud. "Captain Reyes," Marcus said, "walk me through it." Captain Reyes did. He spoke in the flat, precise sentences of a man who has filled out a great many incident reports in his career and knows exactly which words matter. Passenger arrived at cabin door at 0712, presented boarding pass, was not seated, was questioned, was challenged, was, at 0719, denied boarding by lead flight attendant despite passenger producing identifying information consistent with the charter manifest. Boarding pass was, at 0721, physically destroyed by lead flight attendant in the presence of 3 witnesses, 2 of them passengers on the same charter. Marcus listened without interrupting. When the captain finished, Marcus turned his head very slowly toward the galley curtain. "Ms. Holloway." Brenna did not come out. "Ms. Holloway, please step into the aisle." She came out. Her face was the color of old paper. The red scarf at her throat had loosened, slightly askew, and she had not noticed. She did not look at Imani. She looked at the carpet. "Ms. Holloway," Marcus said, "I want to make sure I understand what I'm being told. Did you or did you not tear up Dr. Okafor's boarding pass after she identified herself as the principal passenger on this charter?" Brenna's mouth opened, closed, opened again. I was following procedure. We have to verify. That is not what I asked." His voice was not loud. It was steady, almost gentle, the way a surgeon speaks while making the first cut. "Did you tear up the boarding pass? Yes or no?" A long pause. "Yes. Thank you." Marcus turned to the younger woman behind him. "Renee, I need you to call Whitfield Aviation Dispatch. Tell them I'm pulling Ms. Holloway from this flight and asking for a replacement attendant out of the standby roster. Wheels Up is still scheduled for 0745. Renee nodded once and stepped back down the jetway, already speaking into her radio. Brenna's eyes went very wide. "You can't, this is my route. I am the senior attendant on this aircraft. You cannot just—" "Ms. Holloway," Marcus said. His voice did not rise, but something in it did. "You are not flying this aircraft today. You are also, I suspect, not flying any aircraft until Whitfield Aviation completes a review of this incident, which will begin the moment that door closes behind you. You will collect your bag, you will walk down this jetway with me, and you will not speak to Dr. Okafor again unless she chooses to speak to you first. Is that clear?" Brenna's hands had begun to shake openly now. "I want to apologize," she said. The words came out cracked, almost a whisper. "Dr. Okafor? I want to—" "Ms. Holloway," Imani said softly. "Not yet. It was not cruel. It was not even cold. It was simply the truth of the moment." Brenna nodded, and her eyes filled, and she did not say anything more. She walked past Imani into the small crew cubby at the front of the cabin and gathered her overnight bag with the careful, brittle motions of a woman whose entire morning had just rearranged itself around a single decision she could not unmake. Marcus stepped aside to let her pass on the jetway. She did not look back. The thin man in the charcoal suit sat down. Theodore Lange remained standing. He turned to Imani. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have spoken sooner." "You spoke when it mattered, Dr. Lange." "Theo," she inclined her head. "Theo." Captain Reyes was already speaking quietly to Connor at the galley, going over the seat assignments, the catering, the small 1,000 details of getting an aircraft into the sky on time, even when the morning had cracked open in the cabin door. Imani finally stepped across the threshold. Connor came forward with a freshly printed boarding pass on a small leather tray. He held it out with both hands. The way a man offers an apology he is not sure he is entitled to make. "Thank you, Connor," Imani said. She took the boarding pass, glanced at the printed seat number, and tucked it into the side pocket of her portfolio without ceremony. Connor's face was very young in that moment, very tired, very relieved that someone had said his name out loud without anger in it. He nodded twice, quickly, and stepped back toward the galley. Imani walked down the aisle to seat 2A. The cream leather was cool against her hand as she lowered herself into it. She set the portfolio on the empty seat beside her, smoothed the front of her jacket, and looked out the small oval window. Down on the tarmac, Marcus Riley was walking Brenna Holloway across the apron toward the operations building. Brenna was walking with her arms crossed tight, her head down, her overnight bag bumping against her hip with every step. She did not look up at the aircraft. Imani watched her until she disappeared through the operations door. Then she closed her eyes for exactly 3 seconds. When she opened them again, the slow heat at the back of her neck had cooled, and her hands were perfectly steady, and she was ready to work. The cabin door closed at 0738. Captain Reyes brought the Gulfstream up off the runway at 0746, 1 minute behind schedule, and banked it gently westward over the Hudson. The replacement attendant was a quiet woman named Diane, who had been pulled from a standby roster 15 minutes earlier and had come aboard with a small overnight bag and the unflappable manner of a person who had seen, in 22 years of flying, almost every variety of trouble a cabin could produce. She offered coffee. She offered breakfast. She made no reference to what had happened at the door, and her professionalism that morning was a kind of mercy. Theodore Lang settled into the seat across the aisle from Imani once the seatbelt sign went off. He did not immediately speak. He opened his briefcase, removed a folder, set it on his tray table, and only after several minutes had passed did he look up. "Imani," he said. It was the first time he had used her first name, Theo. "I have been on the board of 3 aerospace companies over the last 20 years. I have watched a great many people get told they were in the wrong room. Most of them eventually left. I would like you to know that I noticed which ones stayed." She looked at him. There was a long silence, the kind that does not need filling. "Thank you," she said finally. "I'm not asking for thanks," he said. "I'm asking if you will permit me to be useful this afternoon. The signing in Seattle is going to be a formality. The capital is committed. But I have a sense sitting here that the next 48 hours are not going to be only about a signing." Imani regarded him over the rim of her coffee cup. He was right, of course. He was a man who had built a career on being right about exactly that kind of thing. "I would welcome your counsel, Theo," she said. He nodded once and went back to his folder. 3 hours into the flight, somewhere over Nebraska, Imani's phone buzzed against the armrest. She had it on cellular through the aircraft's onboard system, and the screen lit up with a name she had not expected to see that morning, Celine Park. She picked up on the first ring. "Celine, Imani, I need you to brace for something." Celine's voice was tight, controlled, the voice she used when she had bad news that she needed to deliver in a single clean sentence so it could not be misunderstood. "There's a video." Imani's hand tightened slightly on the phone. "What kind of video?" "One of the passengers in the back of your cabin this morning, the one in the charcoal suit. His name is Russell Hartigan. He's a managing director at a competing private equity firm. He filmed part of the incident on his phone. The first 90 seconds, beginning from when Ms. Holloway was telling you to step back onto the jetway and ending right around the moment Dr. Lang stood up." Imani closed her eyes. "Has it been posted?" "It went up to LinkedIn 46 minutes ago." He posted it with a long caption about, quote, "witnessing one of the most disturbing acts of corporate gatekeeping I have seen in 20 years of business travel," end quote. He named the aircraft. He named the charter. He named you. A pause. "Imani, it has 11,000 shares already." Imani opened her eyes. Across the aisle, Theo Lang was watching her with the careful attention of a man who could read a phone call from the shape of a woman's shoulders. "Is that all of it?" she asked. "No. 2 financial news desks have picked it up. One of them already called for comment. Whitfield Aviation has gone silent, which means their crisis team is in a conference room right now trying to decide how exposed they are. And, Imani, yes. Brenna Holloway has retained a lawyer within the last hour. A lawyer who, my contacts tell me, specializes in wrongful termination claims with a particular interest in cases involving, and I'm quoting now, racially motivated dismissal narratives that scapegoat working women. A long, careful silence. She's planning to come for you. Imani let the silence stretch. Below the aircraft, the patchwork of Nebraska farmland slid past in pale October colors, brown and gold, and the occasional bright square of winter wheat. She had spent a long time learning what to do in the first 10 seconds after a piece of bad news landed. The trick, she had learned, was to do nothing, to let the body settle, to let the part of the brain that wanted to swing back sit quietly for a count of 10, while the part of the brain that built companies came forward instead. "Celine," she said finally, "yes. 3 things in this order. First, do not issue a statement, not yet. Anything we say in the next 4 hours will be picked apart by people who have already decided what happened. We let the video breathe. The video is on our side. Second, I want you to pull the cabin manifest, the gate scan log, the boarding pass print log, and any footage from the jetway camera at gate B4. Marcus Riley will help. He has already opened the incident file. I want all of it preserved before anyone at Whitfield Aviation gets the bright idea that selective evidence is a survivable strategy. Third, find out who Brenna Holloway's lawyer is. Not the firm, the lawyer, the actual name. I want to know who I am dealing with before the first letter arrives." Celine was writing as Imani spoke. The sound of her keyboard was faint and rapid. "Anything else? Yes, call my son. Tell him I'm fine. Tell him before he sees the video on his own feed at college and panics." A small, soft exhale on the other end of the line. "I'll call David now." "Thank you, Celine." Imani set the phone down on the armrest. Across the aisle, Theo Lang was waiting. He did not ask. He simply waited. The way a good lawyer or a good doctor waits for a patient to choose their own words. "There's a video," Imani said, "of the incident at the door." Theo nodded slowly. "Russell Hartigan." Imani's head turned. "You know him. I know of him. He sits on a board with my younger brother. He is a decent man, by which I mean he is decent about 90% of the time, and remembers to be decent on the other 10% only when he has been watched. He filmed it. He posted it. Then we are about to find out which Russell Hartigan we are dealing with this week." Theo closed his folder. He turned slightly in his seat to face her more directly. "Imani, may I offer an unsolicited piece of advice? Please, there is going to be pressure in the next 48 hours for you to become the protagonist of a different story. A story about a wronged woman who triumphs over a flight attendant. That story is going to be very loud. It is going to be very profitable for a great many people who are not you. And it is going to obscure the story you have actually been building for 12 years, which is about an aerospace company that is about to become one of the largest minority-founded defense suppliers in the country." He paused. "Do not let them give you the smaller story." Imani looked at him for a long moment. "Thank you, Theo." He inclined his head and opened his folder again. The Gulfstream began its descent into Boeing Field at 10:42 Pacific Time. By then, the video had 340,000 views. By the time the wheels touched down, it had crossed 500,000, and the first 2 cable news segments were already in production. Imani's phone buzzed continuously in the side pocket of her portfolio. She did not look at it. She walked down the air stairs with Theo Lang 1 step behind her and a black SUV waiting on the apron with its rear door already open. A driver in a gray suit held the door. He did not say her name. He had been instructed not to. Inside the SUV, Celine Park was waiting in the rear-facing seat, a tablet in her lap, and a phone pressed to her ear. She held up one finger to Imani, finished the call in 3 clipped sentences, and lowered the phone. "Brenna Holloway's lawyer is a woman named Caitlin Farrow," Celine said without preamble. "She is good, she is expensive, and she is, as of 40 minutes ago, on a flight from Newark to Seattle." Imani slid into the seat across from her. "She is coming here today. She is coming to the signing." Imani considered this. How did she know about the signing? Brenna Holloway knew the destination of the flight. She knew the charter was in the name of Lattimore Aerospace. She knew there was a major event in Seattle today. She told her lawyer, and Caitlin Farrow is smart enough to know that the most damaging place she could possibly appear today is in a hotel lobby downtown at 4 in the afternoon, with cameras, 10 minutes before you walk in to sign a $410 million acquisition. Theo Lang, climbing into the SUV behind Imani, exhaled slowly. "Ah," he said, "there it is." The SUV pulled away from the apron and onto Marginal Way, heading north toward downtown Seattle. The morning haze had burned off, and the city sat clear and bright against the dark line of the Cascades. Inside the vehicle, no one spoke for a full minute. Celine watched Imani, Theo watched Imani, Imani watched the road. "Celine," she said finally. "Yes, where is the signing scheduled?" "The Olympic Club, 4th floor, the Cascade Room, 4 o'clock. 5 investors plus you, the acquisition target's CEO and CFO, 2 outside counsel, 2 communications leads, and a notary. Press release goes out at 4:15. Who is the communications lead on our side?" "Whitney Adair, she landed at SeaTac an hour ago. She's at the hotel now." "Get her on the phone." Celine tapped twice and handed Imani the device. The call connected. "Whitney." "Imani, oh my God, are you all right? I have been watching this thing climb every 5 minutes. We need to—" "Whitney, stop." A pause. The voice on the other end gathered itself. "Yes. We are not issuing a statement before the signing. We are not issuing a statement during the signing. The signing happens at 4. The press release at 4:15 is the one we wrote 3 weeks ago. We do not add a single sentence about the incident. Not one, are we clear? Imani, with respect, the entire business press is already writing the other story. If we don't address it, we will address it at 5, not before. The first thing the world hears from me today is not about a flight attendant. The first thing the world hears from me today is that Lattimore Aerospace has closed a $410 million acquisition. Then, and only then, we talk about the other thing on my terms, in my words." A long breath. "Understood. Whitney." "Yes. If Caitlin Farrow walks into that hotel lobby at 3:50, what do we do?" Another pause, shorter this time. "We do not engage. We do not let any member of our team engage. We walk past her, we get into the elevator, we close the door." "Correct. Thank you." Imani handed the phone back to Celine. Theo Lange folded his hands in his lap. He had not interrupted once during the call. "Imani," he said, "there is one more piece I want to put in front of you before we get to the hotel. Yes, Caitlin Farrow is a serious lawyer. She is also a tactical one. She did not get on a plane to Seattle this afternoon because she thinks she has a wrongful termination case. She has, at best, a difficult termination case given that her client tore up a passenger's boarding pass on camera in front of witnesses. Caitlin Farrow got on that plane because she thinks she can use the optics of the next 24 hours to extract a quiet settlement before any of this becomes a deposition. Yes, which means the most important thing you can do today is not give her optics. Do not be photographed near her. Do not be quoted near her. Do not let anyone on your team be photographed near her. Make her stand alone in that lobby with nothing to film." Imani nodded slowly. "Theo." "Yes. There's something else I want to do tonight, after the signing, after the press release. Tell me." "I want to call Brenna Holloway." Theo went very still. Celine's hand paused over her tablet. "Imani," Theo said carefully, "I would strongly advise against that. I'm not asking your advice on whether to do it. I am telling you I'm going to do it. I'm asking how to do it cleanly." A long silence in the SUV. Theo Lange looked at her, and something in his face softened, just slightly. "May I ask why?" "Because in 8 hours, that woman is going to be the most hated person on the American internet. And whatever she did to me at the cabin door this morning, I do not want my name to be the reason her life ends tonight. I want to put a phone call on the record. 3 minutes, witnessed, notarized if necessary. I will not offer her forgiveness. I will not offer her a settlement. I will offer her one sentence, which is that I am not asking the world to destroy her. The world will decide what it wants to do with that, but I will have said it." Theo was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I will set up the call. Celine's office, on the record, with counsel on the line. After 8 tonight, after the signing has cleared, not before. Thank you." The SUV pulled up under the porte cochere of the Olympic Club at 12 minutes past 2. The lobby was visible through the glass doors. A small cluster of people stood near the concierge desk, 3 of them holding phones up in a way that was not quite filming and not quite not filming. None of them was Caitlin Farrow. Not yet. Imani stepped out of the SUV with her portfolio under her arm and walked through the doors without breaking stride. The signing happened on time. The Cascade Room was a long paneled space on the 4th floor with a row of windows that looked east across the city toward Capitol Hill and the foothills beyond. A polished walnut table ran down the center. 12 chairs, 3 pens laid out on a small velvet tray, a pitcher of water sweating gently in the afternoon light. Imani entered at 3:58 with Theo Lang one step behind her. Celine stayed in the lobby. Whitney Adair was already at the table, tablet open, her face composed. The other investors rose as Imani came in, 4 men and 1 woman, and there was a brief, slightly awkward moment in which several of them clearly wanted to acknowledge what had happened that morning, and several others clearly wanted to pretend they had not seen anything. Imani gave them all the same calm nod. "Thank you all for being here, shall we?" They sat. The acquisition target's CEO, a soft-spoken engineer named Hollis Trent, opened his folder. The outside counsel walked them through the final clauses. At 4:07, Imani signed her name on the first page. At 4:11, the last signature was witnessed. At 4:14, the notary stamped the final document. The cap of her pen clicked closed, and the deal was done. At 4:15, the press release went out. Lattimore Aerospace completes $410 million acquisition of Avila Defense Systems, creating largest black-founded defense supplier in North America. Imani stood. She walked to the windows. For a long moment she looked east at the city, at the long, slow slide of the afternoon light across the rooftops, and she did not think about cabin doors or torn boarding passes or video views. She thought about her grandmother in Birmingham, who had cleaned other people's kitchens for 40 years. She thought about her mother, who had taught high school chemistry for 31 years in a building that had no working air conditioning. She thought about the night, 15 years ago, when she had sat at a kitchen table in a one-bedroom apartment with a sleeping 6-year-old in the next room and written, in pencil on the back of a utility bill, the first 3 lines of what would eventually become the business plan for Lattimore Aerospace. She did not cry. She had stopped crying about that kitchen table a long time ago. But she stood at the window for a count of 12, and she let the sentence "largest black-founded defense supplier in North America" sit inside her chest until it had found its place. Then she turned around and went back to work. Caitlin Farrow had been standing in the lobby of the Olympic Club since 3:47. She had a small wheeled suitcase beside her, a navy blazer, a sharp gray bob, and a phone in her hand. She had also brought with her a freelance photographer named Daniel, who had been pretending to read a magazine on a leather couch 10 feet away. By 4:20, when the signing was complete and the news of the acquisition was hitting business desks across the country, Caitlin Farrow had been standing in the lobby for 33 minutes without speaking to anyone, because no one from Lattimore Aerospace had come through the lobby, because they had all entered through a side entrance Theo Lang had arranged, and because the only person who tried to approach her, a young reporter from a local affiliate, had asked her the wrong question, which was, "What are you doing here?" At 4:32, Caitlin Farrow picked up her suitcase and left the building. Daniel, the photographer, followed her out without taking a single picture. He had, in the end, no picture to take. At 7:48 that evening, Imani sat in a small private office Celine had arranged on the 11th floor of the hotel. The room was simple: a desk, 2 chairs, a speakerphone. Theo Lang sat to her right. Celine to her left. A court reporter in a navy cardigan sat in the corner with a stenotype machine. Because Imani had decided in the SUV that afternoon that the call would be transcribed, Caitlin Farrow had agreed to put Brenna Halloway on the line for 3 minutes, on the record, with the understanding that nothing said in the call could be used in any future legal proceeding by either side. Celine had typed the terms. Both lawyers had signed. The phone rang twice. A small click. "Dr. Okafor." Brenna's voice came through the speaker, thinner than it had been that morning, scraped clean by 12 hours of weeping and lawyering and watching her own face climb the internet. "Ms. Halloway." Imani's voice was steady. Not warm, not cold, just present. "I asked for this call so I could say one thing to you in front of witnesses, on the record. Are you ready to listen?" A pause. "Yes. I am not asking the world to destroy you. I'm also not asking the world to forgive you. The world is going to do what the world is going to do. But you should know from me tonight that I am not the engine of what is coming for you. I will not give a single interview in which I name you. I will not testify against you in a civil proceeding unless I am subpoenaed. The video that is being shared tonight was not filmed by me, was not posted by me, and will not be amplified by me. What happens to your life from here is between you, your conscience, and the public record. It is not between you and me. That is all I came here to say." There was a long silence on the line. The court reporter's fingers paused above the keys. Theo Lang did not move. Celine did not move. And then, very softly, Brenna Halloway began to speak. Dr. Okafor. Yes, I do not deserve this call. That is not for me to decide tonight, Ms. Holloway. I have been sitting in a hotel room for 6 hours trying to understand how I looked at you this morning and saw what I saw. I have been telling myself all afternoon that I was following procedure, but that is not true. I knew, when you said your name, that you might be who you said you were. I knew it, and I made a different decision because it was easier to make. I'm not telling you this to be forgiven. I'm telling you because you are on this phone, and you did not have to be, and the least I can do is not lie to you twice in one day. Imani closed her eyes for a moment. Across the desk, Theo Lange's expression had not changed, but something behind his eyes had. Ms. Holloway. Yes. What you do with what you just said is your work, not mine. I would suggest that the people who deserve to hear it are not me. They are the passengers, going back 10 years, who you did not believe at a cabin door. Some of them will not pick up the phone if you call. Some of them will. You are going to have a great deal of time, I think, in the coming months, to find out which is which. I wish you luck with that work. I will not be part of it. I understand. Good night, Ms. Holloway. Good night, Dr. Okafor. The line clicked. The court reporter typed 2 final strokes and lifted her hands from the keys. The story of what happened at the cabin door of November 740 Lima Alpha did not disappear. Stories like that do not disappear. By the following Monday, Russell Hartigan's video had crossed 11 million views. Whitfield Aviation Services issued a public apology and announced an external review of its cabin crew training protocols led by a retired federal judge. Brenna Holloway's employment was terminated for cause. Caitlin Farrow quietly withdrew the wrongful termination filing she had been preparing, citing, in a brief written statement, new information that has materially changed our assessment of the matter. The matter she was referring to was the cabin door surveillance footage from Gate B4, which Marcus Riley had preserved at 7:26 on the morning of October 14th, and which showed in 18 unbroken seconds of high-definition video the moment Brenna Holloway tore Imani Okafor's boarding pass in half. Marcus Riley was promoted to Deputy Director of Ground Operations at Teterboro in February. Connor Pratt left Whitfield Aviation that winter and was hired, on Captain Reyes's personal recommendation, by a competitor that flew exclusively for the Lattimore Aerospace executive fleet. Lattimore Aerospace and Avila Defense Systems closed integration in 11 months, ahead of schedule. The combined company employed 4,100 people across 6 states by the following autumn, and Imani Okafor announced, at the annual shareholder meeting in October, the establishment of the Constance Okafor Scholarship, named for her grandmother, which would pay full tuition and living expenses for 50 black women per year to attend accredited aerospace engineering programs in the United States. Celine Park became Chief of Staff to the office of the founder. Theo Lange joined the board of directors and chaired its newly created Committee on Workplace Dignity and Accountability. The committee's first published report, issued the following spring, contained one sentence that was quoted over the next several years in business school classrooms across the country. The cost of a closed door is not measured in the moment it closes. It is measured in every door that somewhere in the building watches it close and learns. Brenna Holloway moved out of New York that winter. She took a job at a regional carrier in the Midwest, on the ground side, processing rebookings at a small hub airport. She did not return to cabin crew work. She did, in the second year after the incident, begin volunteering on weekends at a community center in her new town that taught conflict de-escalation to retail and hospitality workers. She did not talk about why. The people who ran the center did not ask. Imani Okafor never spoke publicly about Brenna Holloway again in any setting for the rest of her career. When asked in interviews about the incident at Teterboro, she would say only one sentence, and she would say it the same way every time. I was on my way to work, someone else was too. We both had a long day. And then she would change the subject, back to the company, back to the engineers, back to the work, back to the doors she had spent her whole life learning how to walk through, whether or not anyone was holding them open. I hope you enjoyed that story. Please like the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. Peace.